Hey folks, welcome back to the ByteBit. This is going to be a new series, and we're going to take a look at something or a topic that I've been mulling over in my head for quite a while. There have been a couple of requests over the past couple of months, really from, my coworkers and friends who are getting into the Linux world and either have to manage or maintain Linux servers or just want to kind of get an understanding of what the OS is all about, right? What is Linux really about? And so what I've decided to do is put together a series of a couple of videos that kind of just demonstrates the overall maintenance and system information, kind of managing a Linux box, if you will, especially if you get thrown a new box or a particular server that is running Linux, and you need to quickly come up to speed with what it does, how it's configured, hardware, memory, resources, and the like. So hopefully this series will be helpful to a bunch of you out there, especially again if you are new to the Linux world and you want to kind of delve into what the OS has to offer, or you're forced to because of work or other requirements at present. So sit back and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. And again, if you have any questions or comments about the series, please let me know so I can respond accordingly. Also, if there are topics that I do not cover, because obviously there's so much to any operating system, if there are topics that I don't go over that you guys would like me to kind of touch on for this series for the newer folks, please let me know and I'll be glad to kind of incorporate that or give an add-on video so that we can discuss those topics as well. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to go through the motions that an admin, a server admin, network admin, IT admin would go through if he or she were handed the server, laptop, IP address of a new Linux server or an existing Linux server that he or she has to now maintain, upkeep, monitor, and the like. So I think that going through the motions will kind of help those folks new to the OS or to the Linux world kind of get an idea of what kind of processes and methodologies get used when you troubleshoot and administer an OS, a Linux OS box. So I'm at the login screen or the lock screen here. I'm just going to go ahead and click up here to open that up. And by default, you'll either have the credentials to log in, or your AD admin or your LDAP admin will give you those credentials for you to use. So obviously I'm going to assume I have those. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, I may have some information that comes right away to me that I may be familiar with. Now, as a Linux user, I can tell this is Zorin, obviously because one, I installed it before, but I can tell just from the Z and the icon here from the panel up top that it is Zorin. And that already gives me some information in my brain. But even if you didn't know all that, this series will help you get a foothold or your basis for trying to obtain that information. And if you are an admin, my suggestion would be is to use some kind of notepad, note-taking app, OneNote, it doesn't matter. And store some of this information, especially if the server is new to you and you've never really worked with it or managed it for a while. This way you have some backup, copy of data, like for the IP address information, host name, CPU, memory, all of that. So in case something does change, you have a basis to kind of go and reference, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the GUI first because I'm lucky enough to be presented with one. And of course, in the Linux, server, mainframe world, data center world, you really won't see a front-end GUI or the desktop environment, right? One, it's a security issue. If it's not patched correctly. Two, it is resource intensive depending on what applications are installed, video graphics and the like. And then of course three, the command line is much more friendly to admins that need to run applications and monitor clustered environments, high availability environments. Those are the scenarios that you'd see the command line used for ideally. Now, I am going to go through both scenarios where I'll use the GUI to get some information and then I'll use the terminal. And by far, you'll see that the terminal will win every single time, right? 99% of the time, the commands I'm going to show you here will run on almost every distribution of Linux, minus some minor tweaks, maybe a letter A or an F or a G that you can quickly Google. But the result set, the information that you get back from the commands will be far more better or greater in detail than say, searching around for one GUI app over another. Okay, so right now I'm going to try to find the menu here. I'm going to try to find programs, right? I don't know. This looks like a places menu where I can go to like home and downloads and documents, folders, software settings. Okay, I can go through settings and I can try to find something there. Or I can take a look at the dock, right? Because I'm familiar with the Mac world. So I'll take a look at the dock here, and this says to show applications. Okay, I'll bring that up. And you can see there's a whole bunch of apps that are installed. Obviously, again, for the business organization side of things, you won't really see this, but I want to cover all the bases, right? So this way you're comfortable in either scenario, whether it's somebody's laptop, somebody's server, a desktop that is, or an actual server itself in a rack. Okay, I can scroll through here, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type the word about and see if I get lucky. Right, so about gives you details about the information. This is good. So I'm going to open this up here, and this is going to give me a an overview of the system, right? So I can see that under the overview section, I've got the device name or the host name, memory is 11 gigs, processor is the Intel i7 here, it gives you the graphics, base system is Zorin, virtualization is VMware. Okay, so it's a VM in itself, that's good, easy to know. And then you've got your disk space. Now, granted, the disk space is a general space for your main OS disk, which is worth having, but it doesn't tell me how much is free. It doesn't tell me, what usage of that is for swap or virtual memory, if you will. And then of course it doesn't actually tell me the baseline OS systems, the Linux upstream OSs, right? So Zorin actually comes as a part of Ubuntu, or is a derivative of Ubuntu, which is a derivative of Debian, and so you can't see that information. So obviously that is important to know as you install updates for the box. Default applications. Okay, so you can see that there's some default applications here for mail. Again, in an admin world, this really doesn't count for very much, does it? Right? You're not really interested in the web browser or the calendar app or the music app. If you have to administer a server or manage a server, you're really interested in the nuts and bolts of the system so that you can, keep the uptime as high as possible, keep it running. Removable media, okay, and these are just some. So removable media actually asks you questions, right? Like for CD drive, what to do, DVD, music, photos, and stuff. But it actually doesn't show you what's specifically connected. So that's something you'd want to see. All right, so let's go ahead and close this out, and let's take a look at some of those commands through the terminal and see the difference in what you get. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the menu application again here, and I'm going to look for terminal, and the best way to do that is I'm just going to type in terminal. And you get this. Terminal is ubiquitous in terms of the Linux distribution you're running. I can't imagine that somebody would rename that or not allow you to find it in the search. In fact, you can see that just by typing in terminal, I've gotten the console with a K. That's that particular type of terminal, as well as the terminator here, multiple terminals in one window. So it gives you the result you're looking for. I'm going to open that up. Incidentally, most of the Linux distributions out there that have a desktop environment, if you right-click on the desktop, you will have an option to open the terminal. Or if you're in the file manager, you're looking at the documents, if you actually right-click as well, you should be able to open up in a terminal. So let me just open up Documents folder here, and if you right-click, you'll see Open Up in Terminal. And if I do that, it opens up to the Documents directory itself. So if I type in pwd, which is to print the working directory, it shows me that I'm in the home folder, TBB test, which is my username, and my documents folder. So it's a quick and neat way to kind of get into a specific folder that you need to for whatever reason you have. Now, you might notice that I've already gone to the terminal in just a few minutes here, because the terminal is super important in the Linux OS. In fact, if you're running Mac, if you're running Windows and you administer those servers, you're going to use the terminal as well. Or maybe in the Windows world nowadays, you're going to use PowerShell. It is super powerful. It is it's important, and it's easy to administer tasks to the server that normally would take you 6 or 7 clicks and waiting and progress bars by just running a couple of commands and just hitting enter and letting it do its thing. So it is important to every OS, regardless if it's Mac, Windows, or in this case, Linux. All right, so now that I have the terminal open, I'm just going to go ahead and close out some of the other windows here and kind of center this here. And the first thing I'm going to go and do is take a look at the hostname information we just saw through the GUI. So the command is hostname CTL, no spaces, no uppercase letters, just one word, hostname CTL. And what you get is similar information. You get the architecture, which I did not get in the GUI. You get the kernel, which is super important because if you're going to update a server, you want to know what version of the kernel it's running. In this case, it's 4.10. Incidentally, the new kernel that just got released a few days ago as of the recording of this video is 4.14. So kind of gives you an idea of how far behind you are, what updates are available, and you can go research, right? You can go find out if I should upgrade the Linux kernel or not, should I keep it at the version that it's at, and so on. Operating system gives you the 12.2 Zorin, okay, that's good enough to know. Virtualization tells you VMware. Excuse me. So this is letting you know that VMware is the virtualization software that's being utilized. You get a boot ID, machine ID, and the chassis actually lets you know if this is a VM or not. So that is also important to know. You get the icon name, and you get static host name, which is important, right? This is a fairly large host name here, but it is nevertheless the host name. Now, I can type in host name and get that same value, but if I just append CTL to it, I get so much more information. So why use two commands when you can just use one and get the information you're interested in? All right, I'm going to go ahead and type in clear, and that's going to clear the screen for me, so I can go ahead and type the next command here. Okay, so cat is a command that allows you to paste the contents of a particular document or documents to the screen so it's easy to read. And you'll notice that over time, if you start using the terminal, it's going to be second nature to you, and you're going to look for it when you're working on a Linux box or even a Windows box, right? You just become familiar with it, and there's a reason why the terminal and the command line has lasted for so long and is so powerful, because it works and it gives you a lot of power at your fingertips. Okay, so I'm asking the command here, cat, to go and fetch all the documents or files that end in -release from this etc folder. We'll actually go over the folder structure later on, but I'm asking the cat command to get all of these files, or the content of all these files, and within this directory that has a name that ends in /release, and paste that information to the screen. As a result, what's going to happen is you may get some duplicate information, and that's to be expected. But let's take a look and see what you get here. You get a distribution ID, which is Zorin. You get the code name that it's coming from, Xenial. You get a description. You get the name, the version. You get a nice pretty name, which is what it displays for you in the OS. Home URL, version code name. So you can tell what version of the upstream OS it's actually coming from. So Ubuntu Xenial is what's presented here. You can immediately find that out. You can see the ID, things like the ID that it comes from, which is Ubuntu. So you now know that even though this OS is called Zorin, and it's version 12.2, it's actually a downstream or derivative of the Ubuntu operating system. And that should tell you a bunch of things. One, if you look at the Ubuntu release, or if you do a quick Google on it and you see that there are issues with the latest patch, or if there are bugs that have been reported, serious bugs, you know that it's very likely that it might translate into your Zorin OS or your OS for the server, and so you need to be aware of that. So this is something you would kind of look for on the initial go around, and you would kind of take notes of this, right? You want to make sure that you have all these details kind of copied and pasted to some kind of OneNote or text document, because if you're not the only one administering the server, and you get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, or you get a call on Sunday morning right before the game, and you get told that some problem has happened, you need to be able to determine what's going on. Did somebody apply an update? Did somebody upgrade the kernel? Did somebody change out the version? Things of that nature. All right, so let's go ahead and hit clear here, and we'll clear that out. And let's go ahead and take a look at some of the CPU information. So the command is LSCPU. Let me just scroll down here for a little bit. So LSCPU gives you the information about the CPUs in the system, right? So let's go ahead and just take a look at that. And you can see that the architecture is 64. CPU mode operates in both 32 and 64-bit. You can tell that the vendor is Intel. You can get a model specific to the processor or the family here that you can see, and you get the speed of it, you get the virtualization type is full, you get the vendor, you get the L2 cache, L3 cache size, NUMA, which is non-uniform memory allocation, gives you the codes. NUMA is just a way of the path in which memory takes on the motherboard, basically allows for faster responses. And so you can tell so much more from just running a couple of commands about the environment that you're in. And again, I highly suggest that you copy this information down. You may never need it at all, but in the situation that you do, believe me, you'll be glad that you saved it. Okay, let's go ahead and clear that out here. And we're going to look at the free space next. In fact, let's do the free memory or the virtual memory and system memory first. So if I type in free, if I type in free-h, I'm going to get the values for the system memory, but in human readable form. I can see G for gig, so that lets me know that the system has 11 gigs of memory that I can use possibly. And if I were to run that same command without the H, I'm going to get in bytes, which of course, if you are one of those folks that likes to do the math and convert them into gigabytes or megabytes or whatever the case is, great for you, all the power to you. But for most folks, they're going to use the -H because it makes sense and it's easily understood. And so taking a look at the memory here, you can see that it's 11 gigs in total. Used is 1.3, not a lot going on at the moment. Free is 9.1 gigs. Fantastic. I've also got swap listed here. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with swap, think of swap as an overflow bucket, right? So you've got a bucket in the system whereby if the physical memory runs out or is utilized 100% and the system needs more memory, it kind of overspills those resources to the swap partition or the swap disk. And you can see it's actually the size of the memory itself. And ideally, you don't want to be using it. You don't want it to be in use, because what it essentially means is that either you have an application that has gone rogue and using far too many resources, or you have too little memory for the tasks and applications you intend to run on the box. So either way, you need to make a change. You need to fix something here. And so this is the fact that you see 0 bytes are in use. Fantastic. That's ideally what you would like to see. Side note, most of the new operating systems nowadays, they have very good memory management. They've had many, many years at fine-tuning it. So even Windows with their page file or Linux with the swap file or partition, they really worked out how to best use that space there. And nowadays, with memory not really being as expensive as it was, it's not difficult to get a system with 8, 24 gigs or something like that, or even 32 gigs even in your laptop, if that's what you're interested in doing. So that's good information to have. I'm going to go ahead and hit clear here and get back to a clean screen. Let's go ahead and take a look at the disk usage now. Oops, sorry. So if I type in df-h, again, it gives me human readable form numbers here. So G for gig, M for meg, and so on, K for kilobyte, excuse me. And you can see all of the file systems that we have, including the disks. This dev SDA1 is important, and I want to point that out real quick. Dev is device, or short for device, and SDA is that first disk with the first partition on it. And it's got 28 gigs in total. 10 gigs is in use, and 17 gigs is free, 38% is in use. Fantastic. I actually now have a quick snapshot of all of the file systems, all of the disks, how much space I have available, how much space I started out with. And just looking over this over a periodic set of days, months, weeks, whatever your schedule is, you can make sure the system doesn't run out of space, make sure applications don't fail, and the system has a high uptime. Okay, let's go ahead and just clear that out actually and get a clean screen here. And next I would run the who command. And so who basically asks the Linux box who is on this system. So give me all of the users that are connected and what they're doing. As you can tell, TBB test is me. This is my account. And I'm connected to a session, TTY2, and it gives me the date and time. Obviously, knowing who's connected allows me to get an idea of who's on the box, what they possibly are doing on the system, and if I need to contact them because I need to reboot or apply a patch or update, I can certainly do that. So very important command to keep in your toolbox. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at the network information for the particular box that you're connected to, whether that's a desktop or a server in a rack. And of course it's vital information that you need to be aware of. Obviously, if things change or you need to move it to another subnet or you need to change it from a static to a DHCP, you really want to have that information with you so that you can make those appropriate changes. And the command for that is actually ifconfig. And what that really means or stands for is interface config, okay, ifconfig. And if I type that in, this gives you a pretty good snapshot of all of the information related to the networking side. Now, there is also other commands that you can run. There's a whole slew of other commands you can run to get more particular or precise network details. But as a general kind of overview of what the network looks like for a box or a server, this should kind of get you on your way. And if you take a look at the one here at the bottom, which I'll start with, is actually the local loopback address. And so the interface is called LO for loopback. And you can see that the IPv4 address is 127.0.0.1. No big surprise there. You've got a subnet mask of 255.0.0.0, and you've got your IPv6 address as well. In this case, it doesn't have one, but if it did, it would let you know that it does. It also tells you that it's up and running, so this way you know that it's actually allowed or capable of receiving packets of data. You can actually see how many packets were received, how many packets were transmitted. These are at the time that you ran this command, right? So obviously this is going to fluctuate and it's going to update. So when you run the command, that's the snapshot of what data it has. It also tells you if there are any errors, if there are any dropped packets, overruns, collisions in the system that you need to be aware of. So all in all, very, very good information that you really want to kind of be aware of. In fact, one of the quick ways of testing if one of the pieces of hardware, like one of the network adapters, is failing, or the cable might need to be replaced, the network cable, you might come in here and you might see a bunch of errors or drop packets because it couldn't handle that data transmission. So a lot of useful information right at your fingertips. Now the ENS33 is the actual adapter here that we want to take a look at for this particular virtual machine, because this is what's talking to the world. And you can see that it is also up and running, and it has an IPv6 address. We can certainly go ahead and disable that, and we can remove the IPv6 address if we want to, just like you can in Mac and just like you can in Windows. And the important IP address for us now is this IPv4, which is 192.168.1.54. You can see that it's got a 1.255 as the broadcast IP address. This is just the IP address, a segment that anything connected to the .1 will be able to hear, right? This is a broadcast IP address where you would broadcast information to, and it even gives you a subnet mask, which is a class C address, 255.255.255.0. Also important to note is that it gives you the MAC address, the network MAC address. This is the hardware address. This is physically burnt into the device. If you had a physical interface card, it would be burnt into it, or this is for the virtual card. And this is important because there are applications in the real world that will need to be aware of this information. You may need to have this part of your inventory, so it's well worth keeping note of this as well. And here's a perfect example. In the virtual world, you can actually change this MAC address, right? This physical hardware address. And so if you do, you might find that, one of your other admins might change it, or maybe the virtualization software you're using changes it, and, the next day applications that require it fail or stop working. And so this will be a good way to kind of test and see why that happened or why that took place. So a very useful command here. Again, you can take a look at byte send, collisions, you can take a look at package dropped, errors, and pretty much anything in here that would really help you kind of get your network under control, or at least make you aware of your current network settings. All right, so let's go ahead and clear that out here, and we'll switch over to some devices. First thing is you want to take a look at the USB devices. So if I type in LSUSB, what you're going to do is, what you're going to get back is a result set for all of the USB devices connected to your system, including the hubs. The hubs are actually, think of the hubs as the actual USB hub, right? You would buy in a store that you can connect your devices to. In this case, in my virtual machine, I only have a mouse here, so really that's all that's being displayed. Simple enough. Now we can also take a look at the PCI devices. This is going to be a much larger list. But this is going to present to you the list of all of the PCI devices that are connected to your system, or the PCI bridge. And you can see that I've got the VGA controller, I've got the SCSI storage controller here, a couple of open ports. We got the Ethernet controller from the Intel Corporation, multimedia for sound, USB, and SATA controller. So just, again, useful information for having, so you have a decent enough snapshot of how this server is configured. All right, that really takes me to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys got some information out of this. We're going to delve much deeper into these commands. We're going to take a look at system resources, task manager, all the utilities that we would use to kind of figure out which application or process has gone rogue and using too much or too little. So how to kill processes that are quote-unquote stubborn, that you need to free up the system for. So we'll definitely go into a lot more in terms of maintenance and the overall administration of the Linux OS. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any more questions, please let me know in the comments section below. And thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.